if we want to eliminate fear, we have to learn more about something. So if somebody is afraid of being an entrepreneur, we'll learn more about entrepreneurship. The day I decided to become an entrepreneur is when I just, I was like, wow, like I don't want somebody being able to dictate my schedule, and I don't want anybody to, have my fate, my future in the hands of somebody else. I've met a lot of people growing up who, they worked for a company for 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden they're just gone. And I was like, wow, you really, no one's coming to save me. I have to kind of create this for myself.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to the Fan of Life channel, Fan of Life show. Today I have a very special guest. Daniel Kwak is one half of the dynamic duo of real estate known as the Kwak Brothers. These two brothers are entrepreneurs, educators, and real estate moguls, and all before the age of 30. I had a chance to talk to Daniel, the younger brother, today, so we go over a lot of different things that have made them successful. Things such as faith, their belief in themselves, their belief in the American dream, the entrepreneurship spirit, and free enterprise. I am super impressed to find these young guns that go out there and they blaze a trail for not just for themselves, but for future generations as well. I thoroughly enjoy this conversation, and after listening to Daniel, you see why him and his brother are so successful. So without further ado, let's meet and greet Daniel Kwak of the Kwak Brothers. So Daniel, what's up, buddy? Welcome, and thank you very much for making the time to talk to me today.
I love it, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I know a couple of things about you because I actually discovered you through Brad Lee, and then
I love that guy.
Then I got your book, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I know you and you're one half of the Kwak Brothers, which is you, Daniel, and your brother Sam. Sam is older, correct?
He is, yeah.
Okay. Both of you guys are still under 30?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so both you guys are still under 30. You're entrepreneurs, real estate investors, educators, YouTubers, authors. So
too many titles, man. Too many titles.
What I'm basically saying, I'm gonna keep you away from my parents because they're gonna compare and I'm gonna be thrown away. All right. But I got one quick question before we dive into it. I know you guys are super basketball fans, right?
Yes, sir, I am.
Who's the better basketball player, you or Sam?
Oh, anything athletic is me. Yeah. So growing up, Sam's always been kind of like a more jack of all trades, which he's good at everything, right? I think he knows how to play like 18 different instruments.
Oh, geez.
And he prefers kind of the more like the lifting and the running aspects. I'm definitely way more into sports than he is. So I played basketball in high school. I played a little bit in college, and then I did martial arts growing up and did all sorts of things. And yeah, man, I'm a die-hard basketball fan. He could care less about basketball, but for me, and the Bulls are doing great this year. So I could not be more excited.
Well, good for you. You hear that, Sam? It's on record. He's the better basketball player.
Yeah, that's true. He would probably be like, yeah.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that then. So you and your brother have a pretty cool dynamic and a unique story. Give me a little bit of background on how you guys end up in Chicago and your evolution to finding yourself into real estate.
Yeah. So the way we even got to America, it's my dad's a preacher, still is to this day. And, we're followers of Jesus. And, when you follow Jesus, he physically takes you to different places. And, we found ourselves in Chicago, Illinois, and I consider this place my hometown. My nationality is I'm South Korean, but, I'm an American citizen. I'm as patriotic as you could be. I love this country. Everybody, it seems to, we're at a time now where a lot of people seem to be bashing the place. And look, no place is ever perfect, but I think a lot of times we lose. And that's part of being a great entrepreneur is having perspective. Like a lot of people are like, Daniel, how do you motivate yourself? Or Daniel, like, how do you find the energy to do all this? And say, look, like entrepreneurs 100 years ago would have killed at the idea of you having information at your fingertips.
Oh, yeah.
And not only that, but to be in a country where, the opportunity to make money and add value to people's lives is just everywhere and anywhere. We have kids nowadays who are, 19 years old who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of NFTs and CryptoPunks. And, so the opportunity is there. The information is free. When has that ever been the case throughout history? You have never, even at the height of the Roman Empire, the finest and the largest of kings didn't even have access to that.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, if you live in America today, you have access to it whenever, wherever. So anyway, yeah, we came to Chicago. My brother and I are right now, I'm 27, he's 29. He turned 29, I think, a couple months ago. So in terms of how we even got into real estate. So I had read an article when I was 17 years old by Forbes that says that out of all the top 1% of people in the world, 76% of the people who are in the top 1%, who are self-made, made their money in real estate. And so that was my initial kind of like, whoa, like there is something to this real estate thing. And not to mention, you know, I've been a diehard Bulls fan now ever since I came to Chicago. The guy who owns the Bulls, Jerry Reinsdorf, he made his money investing in real estate. Right. So I've heard about it throughout my life. And then, you know, until I was 18, I didn't really, that's when I started learning about it.
So you and your brother were on the same page in terms of that, or did you have the initiative first, or did he have the initiative first and kind of just drug the other brother along?
Oh, I didn't have any initiative when I was a kid, man.
Okay.
Dude, my goal when I was 17, 18 years old is, you know, I just wanted to talk to girls and hang out with my friends, and, you know, go play basketball. You know, I had no interest in investing or anything like that. My plan actually at the time was to be a high school teacher, coach basketball, and then work at a church during the weekends. That was my initial plan. And then my brother started this DJ company when I was 17 years old. And that was kind of like my first introduction to entrepreneurship. And I realized, like, wait a minute, like, you know, I can help people, and I could make money, and I could create my own schedule. Like, you know, why isn't everyone doing this? And then, you know, obviously there's a level of risk there. So maybe it's a good thing that I got into entrepreneurship when I was young, because when you're young, you don't really think about a lot of risk. Just like how when you're a kid, you don't really have a lot of fear. And then you get older, and then, you know, we let the big people influence us. And then we start having all sorts of fears. And then that's, you know, unfortunately, people start acting on them, you know, at one point in their life. And that's the part where it's just like, oof, you know, why can't we all just be kids again?
So let me ask you this then. For someone that, okay, so I'm 45. Let's just say I started out today and I met you for the first time today. I'm at zero. I'm working my 9 to 5, whatever that may be. And I may be earning a good living, but I say I'm 45. I don't know if I can do this for another 20 plus years to get my Social Security, right? Like, can I unlearn that fear? Can I unlearn some of that handicap that life has kind of just shackled me into? What's your belief in that?
Yeah, I mean, let's think about it from a logistical standpoint, right? Like at the end of the day, where does fear come from? Everybody says that fear comes from the what? The unknown.
Yeah, unknown. Right? False evidence appearing real. Yeah,
that's exactly right. You know, so I mean, so I have a fear of snakes, right? Like I can't stand them.
Okay.
But hey, if I went to a zoo, right, and I went to the reptile section, I met somebody who knew all about snakes and could educate me on snakes and tell me how harmless they actually are, and they're actually more afraid of me than I am of them. And, you know, I got to hold one, and a lot of that fear would go away, you know. And the unfortunate is we have this weird thing where if we want to eliminate fear, we have to learn more about something. So if somebody is afraid of being an entrepreneur, we'll learn more about entrepreneurship. The day I decided to become an entrepreneur is when I just, you know, I was like, wow, like I don't want somebody being able to dictate my schedule, and I don't want anybody to, you know, have my fate, my future in the hands of somebody else. You know, I met a lot of people growing up who, you know, they worked for a company for 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden they were just gone. And I was like, wow, you really, you know, no one's coming to save me. You know, I have to kind of create this for myself. Not to say that, you know, people who work a 9 to 5, there's nothing wrong with that, right? If anything, there's nothing wrong with, you know, wanting to put food on the table for your kids, right? There's absolutely, I will never judge somebody's means for being able to do that. But if you talk about fear, a lot of times, you know, it paralyzes us. But unfortunately, for many people, it paralyzes their ability to learn more about it, which is the thing that's going to help them eliminate it anyways, you know? So, and we live in a strange world where, you know, we hear from all sorts of different perspectives. Like if you think about tribalism, at the end of the day, human beings we were meant to live in a tribe of 150 people.
Yes.
Right. That's scientifically, that's actually scientifically.
Not these big cities. No.
Right. That's anthropologically, yeah, something like that.
I'll agree with that word.
Proven, right, that us humans are meant to live in a tribe of 150. So eventually, when you see the same 150 people your entire life, you know, Bob's opinion and Sam's opinion and John's opinion, they all tend to merge, right? Eventually. Well, now our tribe is 8 billion. And so, we don't know who's who anymore. Right. So like I have this rule where it's like, hey, unless you spent 10,000 hours doing something and you're an expert at it, chances are I'll smile and nod and be respectful.
Sure.
But if you're trying to teach me about something that you have no expertise in, then I'm probably not going to listen to you. And that's the problem with a lot of individuals who strive to be entrepreneurs is they hear all the stories. Right. So like out of 100 stories they hear, 95% of them statistically are negative stories when it comes to entrepreneurship. And because they hear 95 stories about entrepreneurship and their failures, that fear magnifies. And so in their mind, they're getting more wood into the fire of fear. And because of it paralyzes them. Well, thousands of years of human evolution and adaptiveness will tell you that it's wrong for you to think that way. So if you want to learn from the best hunter, you should learn from the best hunter, not the people who failed. So again, I think that's just my encouragement to a lot of individuals who are starting out in entrepreneurship is, number one, just be very careful who you get your advice from. And number two, understand that the only time you should listen to 90% of people is when you want their results. And then I would say the third thing is know the difference between inspiration and information. Your inspiration is going to be your ability to develop yourself and what you want and what your mission statement is. And then your information is that thing that is going to castrate your fear, right? And towards an action steps, towards habits and your key performance indicators.
Let's stay on the inspiration part a little bit, because you said, the information is going to castrate your fear. In other words, it's going to counter all the fears, all the stuff that you think that's going to happen that most likely won't even come to realization, right? But then the inspiration, I don't think people spend enough time to really think of their life's mantra, their life's goal, their life's mission. How important is that? I mean, in your own experience, and I know you teach students and stuff too, how heavy do you lean on that?
Yeah, so I tell people, look, if you want to find something that's going to get you to get up every single morning, day in and day out for 10, 15 years, do not look into yourself. Like we live in a culture that pushes the narrative of, hey, like you got to be self-motivated. Hey, you got to find it within you. You got to believe in yourself and you got to have, legacy. I was speaking with a friend of mine who is very successful. He's started and sold multiple 9-figure businesses. Probably has an annual income of 8-9 figures every year. And he's very young. He's only 32 years old. But him and I were talking about this word legacy. And how him and I are not a big fan of this word legacy. Because if you go to an entrepreneurship seminar, Rick, how often do we hear the word legacy?
All the time.
All the time, right? It's right up there with generational wealth and financial freedom.
Sure.
Which, by the way, no one really ever has financial freedom, right? Like it's kind of like saying, you are your own boss. Well, not really. At the end of the day, like we're all held accountable to somebody. If you're an entrepreneur and you're the CEO and you are the top dog, well, guess what? Not your spouse holds you accountable, right? So you report to your spouse, you report to your customers, you report to your board of directors, you report to your board of, like we all report to somebody. And even if you don't report to anybody, like you are an anomaly and you're a single guy with, no spouse, you don't have a board, you don't have customers, right? If that's the case, well, guess what? You report to God, So, I was having a conversation about the word legacy. And if you think about what legacy is, it's, a lot of people say, well, it's I want to pass things down to my kids, and that's not a bad thing. But if you really think about, humanity, right? Well, I'm willing to bet 3 or 4 generations down, your kids will probably not even know who you are. Yeah. Like they won't even know your name.
Very good point.
Right? Like you could, they could receive the financial benefits of what you've done, but your kids, 3, 4 generations down, they're gonna have no idea who you are.
Right.
So for me, right, like I don't know about you, but what motivates me is not something that is temporary. Like I don't get motivated by temporary things. That's just me personally. Like I'm not motivated by cars or watches or nice houses or anything like that. But for me, what I am motivated by is like, what is the ripple that I'm going to leave behind on this earth, right? And I say the word ripple. It's not impact, it's not legacy, but what is the ripple, right? Because what happens is, like, when you throw a stone at a pond, right, it starts off as a very small circle. Right. But the nature of the stone hitting the water is that the circle get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So for me, if I could leave ripples on planet Earth, that's inspiring to me, right? And that inspiration is the engine that fuels the information. And that's what starts everything. Like that, I consider that to be the seed of entrepreneurship, is inspiration into information.
How do you, that's beautifully stated. And you're a martial artist, I'm a martial artist, and that reminds me of, philosophically, a lot of what you kind of like what Bruce Lee always talks about and stuff like that. So, for you, it sounds like your motivation is literally by being on this earth for whatever amount of time that God, allows you, you want to change the trajectory of mankind for the better, on whatever level you can do it at. So how do you get somebody to get something that powerful ingrained in them when they're trying to just make ends meet? Because obviously a lot of times people go, I need to start a business, I need to do XYZ because I got to pay bills or I got to make more money. And I think that's important, but I think that motivation is only short-lived, because the moment a challenge hits, or the moment that paycheck doesn't come, or that project, you didn't win it, it basically kills all momentum. So how do you change the perspective from somebody just trying to survive to being something grander than themselves? Because that was beautifully stated. So
sure. Yeah, well, two things. Number one, where I find it is my relationship with Jesus. Okay. Because and I don't mean Jesus from a religious standpoint, but even if you're not religious, right, you can just look at the person Jesus as a leader, right? So I study great leaders, right? And I get sometimes weird looks by saying this, but I genuinely believe that Hitler was probably one of the greatest leaders in all of mankind. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, he was an evil SOB. You know what I mean? Like, he killed millions of people. He's a horrible person. His intentions are awful. And sometimes the way he did things was awful as well, and he was very manipulative. But at the end of the day, the guy was a phenomenal leader. I mean, his ability to gather people and bring people along and cast a vision of what, like, he was phenomenal at that. But when I look at Jesus, everything he did was all about eternal. Like, nothing was ever about, hey, this is good for 10 years or this is good for 20 years. Everything that he drove home to his disciples, to everybody, it was all about things that lasted forever. Which the Bible states, right? It says that as Christians, we should be harder working because we're working towards an eternal prize as opposed to something that is just here on this earth. But to those people who say, like, hey, I got to feed my kids, or how do I take care of myself today? My business partner, Kevin, has this thing called rabbits and elephants. You got to have your rabbits, which is what you eat today. It's what puts food on the table, but you also have to have your elephants, right? Like, that's your big project, right? That's the ripple effect that you want to have. Which, by the way, I mean, for a lot of people who like work towards just tomorrow, those are the people who quit. Yeah. Like, I've mentored and trained entrepreneurs and real estate investors enough to where, the people who tell me, like, well, Daniel, I want to make money, I want to do this, or like, they're the ones that typically quit, right? But for the people who tell me, like, hey, I have a bigger end goal, right? Like, I have something outside of myself that I'm being held accountable to. Those are the people who usually stick around and eventually win. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, is that for some it will take a year, for some it'll take 10, but eventually you win.
Right. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, maybe on a different podcast, but I said, if you're lucky enough to live long enough, time is the greatest equalizer for everybody. Yeah. Is that consistency over time, right? It's seeing past, like you said, past just the tomorrow result. So now jumping back into real estate, obviously you and your brother have had great success with it. What do you think has helped you guys leap forward so quickly in terms of your achievement and acquiring assets? So just to promote your book, and you can do a better job promoting than I can, but I bought this right here at the beginning, I want to say, of March. I read it, and just a quick thank you to you and your brother. I did my first 2 seller finance deals off of this book. Nice. And I'm not going to give all the secrets away. The concept I never really understood until I really honed down and started reading it. And my conversations with sellers changed differently. So we'll get into that. And like I said, people need to read the book, and I'll promote it at the end of the video and what have you. But what do you think separates you guys from a lot of real estate entrepreneurs that went out there that maybe took a longer road? Because you guys, like light speed, man, it seems like.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And a lot of the stuff that has helped me is definitely in the book. But so here's what people typically do. What people typically do is that they'll go to a seminar, right? If they want to be successful in real estate, they'll read a bunch of books, they'll go to a seminar, they'll listen to a bunch of podcasts, they might buy a couple courses here and there, and they'll do exactly what the person tells them to do. And that's not a bad thing, right? That's not bad at all. What I did was, I went through all the courses I bought. I did all the same things, but I didn't accept them as absolute truths. What I did is I asked a lot of questions in terms of what people were really looking for. So even with like sellers and seller financing, right? Like a lot of the people teaching me seller financing, a lot of the podcasts and books that I've read on seller financing and creative financing was all about like, hey, like, will you grant me seller financing? Will you give me seller financing? And for me, I was like, well, that's BS, because I don't want to ever do anything in which it feels like that person is doing me a favor. Right. Like the way I think of entrepreneurship is, well, if my intent is to solve a problem and you're asking people to do this for you, well, aren't you becoming the problem for them? Right. So for me, I wanted to kind of create a way where, like, how can I get the scenario? How can I do this, but actually look for the people that need this? I'm actually solving their problem for them, as opposed to, hey, do me a favor and do this for me. So at the end of the day, I believe there are 3 questions that are absolutely essential. I don't care if you're a real estate investor, I don't care if you're an entrepreneur, I don't care if you sell tampons, for all I care, right? Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you should be asking the same 3 questions every single day. Number 1 is, what is your competitive advantage? As in, like, who are you and what do you offer that nobody else offers? Number 1, what is your competitive advantage? Number 2, who is your ideal client? And number 3, what is your irresistible offer? So like every single business that I've had the pleasure of being at, like, I've always asked myself those 3 questions. So even with real estate and like seller financing, I had to ask myself, I was like, well, what is the one thing that separates me from everybody else that wants to do seller financing? Number 2, who is my ideal client? Like, who are the people that actually want to do this and need to do this? And then number 3 is, what is my irresistible offer? Right. So when I think back, when I was like 21 or 22, I asked myself, so, hey, like, what separates me from everybody else? And at the time it was nothing, right? Like there was nothing that separates me from anybody else. So I had to find a way. It's like, okay, when I talk to these sellers, like, how can I differentiate? How can I separate myself from, these other individuals that are wanting seller financing? And the way I separated myself was exactly kind of how I portrayed in the book is, hey, like, I'm here to solve your problem. And this is my solution, as opposed to, hey, I like seller financing. Will you do this for me? Right. Or like, hey, can I negotiate it so that I can negotiate for seller financing? For me, I never negotiated for seller financing. I actually created a space where it was actually stupid of them to say no to it because of how beneficial it was to them. So number 1, that's how I separated myself. Number 2, who was my ideal client? So I reverse engineered what the benefits of seller financing was, and then found who are the people that receive the most benefits, and then how can I best find these people? So I think I mentioned in the book that I spent like an entire week writing down all the benefits of seller financing for the seller. And then I figured out, well, who do these benefits, who reaps the most from these benefits? And I found that it was older landlords. And then I was like, well, how do I find older landlords? Well, it's certainly not through, any technological, savvy ways, right? It's more so like road signs and newspaper ads and kind of a lot of the old school marketing, maybe even mailers. So I started doing that. So that's how I found my ideal client, by reverse engineering my end result. And then last but not least, what was my irresistible offer? Well, I thought about this a lot, right? And I actually didn't even include this in the book, which in hindsight I should have. But my irresistible offer was thinking through, well, like, what are some of the biggest concerns for people who want to do seller financing, but they're hesitant, right? The one thing that I've heard every single time for sellers who want to do seller financing, but they're super hesitant, is that they're worried that the individual is going to completely trash the place.
Yep.
right? And they're going to get their property back in 2-3 years, and it's just going to be a crap storm. You know, like all the windows are broken and yada, 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 and they have to go back and fix everything. So my irresistible offer was, hey, I will, if you want, we can add to the contract that I am subject to inspection every single 2 years, right? And we split the bill, right? Like I take care of half of it, you take care of the other half, because this really is for them, right? It's for the seller.
Yeah.
But we can put an addendum where you choose the inspector, right? An inspector of your choosing, and I have to go through an inspection every 2 years, and I pay for half. That was my irresistible offer. And then if it didn't meet inspection, I had 90 days to figure it out.
Right.
Like I had 90 days to make sure that it's in good condition. That was my irresistible offer, and sellers loved it. They were like, "Wow, really? Like that mitigates my risk like 100-fold."
Well, it kind of brings us back full circle, the earlier conversation, right? You found a vehicle to resolve their fear, right? So
100%.
that was it. So you answered the question of what their fear would have been or should have been. So that's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what business is, man. It's just like helping people alleviate their fears through your product or service.
So I'm gonna block this into probably 3 questions because I want to value your time. So let me ask you this: being so young, what do you foresee yourself, let's say 5 years from now, from an industry standpoint? Because obviously you guys are really leaning into your YouTube channel. You guys are getting a great following, huge, awesome, content. What do you see yourself in terms of the education side? Are you going to expand that even more now going on? What do you see on that?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's as much as I want to say, like in 5 years, I want to have, 2 million subscribers on YouTube. I want to have, 1,000 students. I want my real estate company to be $1 billion in assets under management. Like as much as I want to say all those things, I think I mentioned in the book, don't set goals, set standards and expectations, right? And not only that, but it's just at the end of the day, like I think about the things where like, hey, if I do that one thing, everything else will kind of be solved.
Right.
So at the end of the day, like I want to be a better follower of Jesus. I want to be the best husband that I can be. And I want to be the greatest friend that anyone could ever have, So I think if I do that, then a lot of other things will take care of themselves. But if I can do those 3 things, I'll be a very, very happy man.
So sometimes it's just, you got to keep things simple. It's as tried and true, right? You keep it simple. You do the things you're supposed to do day in, day out, and everything else kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah. When I think of like a friend of mine asked me this question, like, what do you want to do in 5 years, right? Like, what do you want your life to look like? I actually had two of my friends ask me that question today, like this morning. And I think that made me think about who I was 5 years ago. And if you would have told me my life 5 years ago, I would have been like, no way. Because I underestimated what I could have done in 5 years.
Yep.
A lot of people, there's a lot of people, especially in the real estate industry, who say that they've been doing something for 40 years, right? But for a lot of them, the reality is they've had 1 year of experience just 40 times over.
Oh.
I think that's the biggest trap that entrepreneurs a lot of times fall into, is that they just have 1 or 2 years worth of experience just many, many times over. And so for me, like a lot of people tell me like, hey man, you're really young for having achieved what you've achieved. Well, for me, that's just because I've had the 8-9 years I've been doing this. I've had many years worth of experience jammed into 1 year for 8-9 years, as opposed to having 1 year of experience 8-9 times over, So I think that's just really, really important to know, especially if you're an entrepreneur. I mean, the best ones that I know at least are always continuing to learn. They're always wanting to have more experiences and be open-minded and, whatnot. So 5 years from now, that's fun to think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's the power, right? I mean, we do OPM, we do all this stuff in real estate, and it's all about leverage, and experience can be leveraged too, books, seminars, networking. You leverage other people's experience, success, and failures, and it condenses your own experience into that timeline like you were talking about.
Yeah.
So economy wise, where we are right now, what are you, I don't want to use the word fearful, what concerns you right now in terms of the economy, overall economy?
Yeah, my biggest concern with the economy is that right now, the real estate market, the stock market, and many different markets have gotten a taste of what a high inflation, low interest rate economy looks like. So I mean, just to give you an idea, we've issued trillions of dollars to Americans in the form of stimulus, but at the same time, we've had very high inflation all throughout this year. Interest rates have been at zero, the lowest it's been, since 2008, right? 2009. And not only that, but, the Fed has just been on this montage of buying everything that it could.
Right.
And because of it, it's increased valuations on stocks, real estate, you name it, even to the point where we now have a new subcategory of commodities in the form of cryptocurrency, So, I mean, it's just, that's what's most fearful for me right now, is that most people will get used to this environment. A lot of people are saying that, oh, prices are going to stabilize. I don't think so. I think that a lot of the people who are worried about a crash are wise, because we've never seen anything like this.
Right.
We haven't. We've seen parts of it, right? Like we've seen a high inflationary market in the 1970s. But when's the last time, like, nobody can answer this question. When's the last time the reverse repo market has hit 1 trillion? The repo market wasn't even existent up until like 2019. I'm sorry, it was existent, but September of 2019 was when it really started getting scary, right? When they started doing hundreds and millions and billions of dollars. When's the last time we had over $8 trillion in the Fed balance sheet?
Right.
When's the last time, while that's going on, we have a high inflation market over 6%, we have a 0% interest rate. When's the last time in the history of the United States that's ever happened? And people are saying that prices are going to stabilize. I don't know, man. Maybe, maybe not, And at the same time, our government just passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
And we raised the debt ceiling yet again for the 15th time since 2001. So it's just like, how long can we keep doing this for?
Right.
Right. And so, my concern is for me 5-10 years from now, right? But I'm sure that Daniel then will be smart enough to maneuver those decisions, right? But that's what so we've been having a lot of our investors' money, in my fund, Miati Partners Capital, we've been having a lot of investors' money in land in areas that are very high growth. In my opinion, I think that's the best way to hedge against what's potentially happening right now and protect investors' money. Again, this is not financial advice, but this is just what I would do, right? Right. What I would do is I'd probably cash out of a lot of things while valuations are still high, and put it into things that I know are going to hedge turbulent economic times. So we're actually buying up land and developing it and improving the land in the second fastest economic growing county in the United States. And, I'm very excited. We've got great projects going on. So that's what I'm doing in the midst of everything that's happening.
And anyone listening to this, again, just like Daniel said, it's not financial advice. We're just sharing what we personally believe. Do your own research, do your own due diligence, ask the right people.
For sure.
It's scary because just like anything, right? It becomes normal. Anything can become normal. And the printing of money has just become so normal. And it became normal so quickly that it blows my mind. You know what I mean? So I think from a Fed standpoint, from a government standpoint, we're going to see a couple more rounds of this before we actually have to answer the piper, to quite honestly.
Yeah. And, when it comes to the housing market, right, like a lot of people are saying like, well, that the housing market's going to stabilize in price because we still have a big pool of buyers that are standing in the sidelines. Well, my question is, how legitimate are those buyers in terms of their strength and their consumer confidence to be able to purchase a home? Because a lot of people were saying that, oh, well, the housing market's fine because we have a market that is stabilized by the mortgage-backed securities market. Well, nobody answered the question in terms of how strong and how stable are those bonds within those securities. And now we know in hindsight that all those mortgages were awful. Right.
Right.
And it was built on Jenga blocks, right? On stilts. So a lot of people are saying, well, right now the housing market's fine because we still have a big pool of millennial buyers that are still waiting in the sidelines. Well, for me, I'm not exactly sure how secure and how strong that pool is, because, what if the Fed tapers, they increase the interest rate, and all of a sudden, 10% or 20% of your buyer pool gets eliminated because all of a sudden they can't afford the higher interest rate. What happens when we start enforcing and actually, driving home student loan payments?
Right.
What happens then? I just mentioned two things, and these two things have a potential to eliminate a lot of people from that buyer pool.
Right.
So maybe that demand isn't as legitimate, as big as we thought. You know, the biggest mistake that I think people can make is make assumptions on what demand and supply really is. You know, so again, I don't have a crystal ball, but all I know is here are the potential outcomes of what can hurt us, and here's what I'm going to do to protect myself, but most importantly, the investors who invest in my company.
Right. I also think paradigm shifts have a lot to do with buying power and buying pool as well too. I mean, yeah, we have the largest buying pool right now, but the reality is, like, you know, that shift can happen quickly. I mean, not to go into a rabbit hole, but you're talking about, you know, the metaverse, you know, and everything else. It's like, do people really want big houses, or do they just want a studio apartment? They're going to live their life on the virtual reality realm. You know what I mean? It's weird. It's ever going, ever evolving. And I think the key takeaway, what you said there was, you know, continue to watch what's going on and adapt, be versatile and adapt. And Daniel's going to do what's going to be right. And you're going to maneuver the way you feel that's going to be the best for your business and your family. And I advise everyone to do the same. I think the worst thing you can do is not do anything, right? It's just to be a cog in the wheel and just kind of clock in, clock out, and then just pray for the better days. You have to create those better days yourself. So Daniel, I want to leave you before I ask you to promote your business and your brother's functions and everything else. Leave us with maybe one or two tidbits overall as an entrepreneur. Like, if you have a kid coming out of college, or not even going to college, or someone that's a little bit older, what are some words of wisdom you can pass on in terms of going forward? You know, this is America. This is an entrepreneurial built society, built country. Take advantage of it. The floor is yours. What's your words of encouragement, sir?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I mean, there's a lot I can say there, right? And but you specifically keyed in on the kid in college, and for some reason that stuck with me because I'm a dropout.
Perfect.
You know, and I guess I'll just share this one story that's you know, cool. It's life changing, and then I'll kind of just leave you with that.
Please.
But so I remember I was a junior in college, and I was thinking about dropping out, right? And you know, I started my real estate business when I was a late freshman. And so this was around like 2 years in already in my business, and my brother were making decent money. You know, I mean, I wouldn't say we were making the money that we're making now, nowhere close, but we were making enough to live on, right? And so, I mean, I remember having a conversation with my professor, and the professor's name was Robert Nisley. And I say his full name because he deserves total credit, you know, for what had happened. But I remember I was a junior, and I went to his office. I was asking a bunch of people who I respected in the university, like, hey, like, do you think I should drop out? Like, I'm thinking about dropping out. Like, what do you think? You know? And everybody was just like, oh, like, don't drop out, you know, get your degree, at least get the safety net, you know, get the option. And I realized I was talking to people who just knew absolutely nothing about entrepreneurship, which by the way, today blows my mind. Because it's just like, dude, how are you going to give advice on something that you have no idea about, right? That's like asking an NFL player, hey, should I play in the NFL or should I play in the NBA? Right? Like, what is that person going to say? Right? Like, do what I did. He has no idea what the NBA is like, right? Like, I mean, so anyways, so this Professor Robert Nisley, he goes, well, you're a big basketball fan, right? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. He goes, well, okay, well, like, does every high school prospect that goes into university, do they always stay all 4 years? And I'm like, no. So he's like, yeah, I mean, look at a guy like, you know, and at the time, the big high school prospect that was like in college at the time, so this is like 2015 or 14 or something like that, was like Andrew Wiggins, right? Like, he was like, Andrew Wiggins was a really popular name and whatnot. And so he was like, well, look at a guy like, you know, Andrew Wiggins, right? Like, did he stay all 4 years at Kansas? No, right? Like, some people are what's known as one and dones, right? So when they feel like they're ready for the NBA, the professional level, they declare for the draft. So he kind of asked me the question. He's like, do you feel like you're ready for the NBA business, right? Like, do you feel like you're ready at that professional level? And I'm like, yeah, I felt ready a year ago. And he goes like, what are you still doing here then? Like, get out there. Like, you can always come back and get your degree, but like, don't let other people talk you out of something that they themselves never did. And he was actually nice enough to go like, by the way, if it doesn't work out, like, come back and I'll change your grade. Like, I know you're a smart kid. Like, I know, you know, and the context of it was like, I've never done any of the homework because I was actually more so fun. And I missed class like a third of the time. because I was focused on my business, right? Like I had a meeting with an investor. I had, you know, like I was grinding and I was focusing on what I wanted to build. And so he was nice enough to tell me, like, hey, I'll change your grade if you ever want to come back, you know, and I'll give you a fresh start. So that story, like, kind of made me be like, huh, like it made me rethink a lot of things, because growing up, I've always been told, like, get a degree, right? Get good grades, get a job, all that stuff. And he just kind of really helped me put that in perspective. So I should probably go back and visit him. You know, that was about 7 years ago since that story occurred.
That's a cool story, man. Say his name one more time. He deserves
yeah, man. So it's Professor Robert Nisley, and he teaches at Olivet Nazarene University in Illinois.
Great job, Professor. And I think he did what we talked about earlier. He dropped his pebble, and there was a ripple effect that changed the trajectory of your life and made you more because of that. So that's a beautiful story to end on. So talk to me a little bit about what you guys do. How do people find you? I want to promote your YouTube, your social media, and everything else.
Oh, yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, so I mean, people can obviously reach out to us at info@thekwakbrothers.com. If you want the book, you can go to 0to75units.com. The book is completely free, right? The only thing I ask is, hey, pay for shipping, right? You know, I wrote the book and I'm giving it to you for free. At least you can pay for shipping, right? That type of thing. But yeah, our YouTube channel is just the Kwak Brothers. Same thing with our Instagram, and we help people in 2 different ways. I don't need anything from anyone, but you know, I like to, you know, help people, right? So we help 2 different types of people. So one is the active investor, so the individual who wants to do this themselves and learn. So aside from the free book, we have a free meetup as well. So if you're interested in the meetup, email us at info@thekwakbrothers.com. We also have a free owner financing course. So it's 3 hours literally of just free content. I teach you what owner financing is, how to negotiate for it, how to find people that want to do seller financing, how to structure it, kind of all the ins and outs. And that's literally freeownerfinancingcourse.com. And then for individuals who want to be passive investors, as in, you know, they have money and they just want to throw it at a company and then just watch it grow and collect cash flow. That's my company, Miati Partners Capital. So if you want to just go to miatipartnerscapital.com or just email, you know, info@thekwakbrothers and just put the subject line accredited investor. Yeah, they can do that. And by the way, we're a 506c, so we're only allowed to work with accredited investors. So there you go. My compliance officer is now happy with me that I said that. So
good.
There you go, Samson. I said it for you.
There you go, guys. There you go. I will link all of that in the description. And before I let you go, let me give my own, again, tidbit, guys. Anyone that's listening, just remember, guys, life is a beautiful thing. It's also a very short thing. Regardless of how many years you live on earth, go live your best life. And for, you know, people like Daniel, Sam, and myself, the vehicle or the main vehicle is real estate. It doesn't have to be that, but find out what it is for yourself and find the people that can help you get there. And more importantly, give value back. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I am blessed to be able to do this with people like you, Daniel. So, sir, have yourself a great day, and it's been an honor.
Likewise, man.
Take care, buddy.